So, welcome to the Ripples of Change, where we explore how presence and self-awareness shape the way we lead change. Today, I'm speaking with Vidhya Prakash, physician and professor of medicine. Great to have you here, Vidhya.
Thank you, Abby. I'm honored.
Mm. So, let's begin. Vidhya, in your book, The Leadership Learning Curve, you reflect on your journey as a physician and a CMO, a chief medical officer. As you think about that journey now, what feels most alive for you?
I think that's a great question, Abby, and multifaceted. And my gut response to that is being able to transform a healthcare system and being able to lead during a time of great change and great transformation within healthcare itself. That is thrilling and frightening all at the same time. And that right there really is what makes that feel really alive to me. I've been in this role since 2022 as Chief Medical Officer and Associate Dean of Clinical Affairs and Population Health. Many people are confused by that dual role. Well, are you a Chief Medical Officer or are you an Associate Dean? How are you doing both? And I think between the two, the truly transformational part is as Associate Dean of Clinical Affairs and Population Health, really influencing the overall health of the population of the people we serve in Central and Southern Illinois, and working with internal stakeholders and external stakeholders to really ensure that every one of our patients achieves their best health is what makes this just such an inspiring journey.
Mhm. Can you take me into a moment where that was a thrilling moment of transformation?
Yeah. In my role, I have had the privilege of working with our internal stakeholders and our hospital partners on something called a community health needs assessment. And it's something that our hospital partners are required to do every 2 to 3 years, where we actually go into the community and in focus groups understand from the community, what do you think the health care priorities need to be? And so we flip things around. Instead of us as a healthcare system setting the priorities, the community sets the priorities. And what I think sets these past few years apart from others is how well we have engaged the community, more so than we ever have in the past. We've been engaging them in quarterly forums where we're breaking them up into their own focus groups based on the four key priority areas that they set,
Mhm.
and asking them to come up with the priorities, the
Mhm.
solutions, who
Yeah.
the stakeholders are to bring in.
Can you describe a moment that felt thrilling to you?
It's interesting what we have been told over and over again as a healthcare system is the community doesn't trust you. And it's not my institution, it's healthcare as a whole. The community, in many ways, has lost faith in US healthcare, our communities at large. And we asked at some point during one of our early community forums, do you trust the healthcare systems, the three ones that are working together right now to enact change? And an overwhelming majority said yes. And
Mm.
that's when it hit me. Oh my goodness, we've made progress here. The community sees a group of leaders, a group of healthcare systems breaking down their silos, coming together, and importantly, engaging them in the work,
Hmm.
listening, understanding
Uh-huh.
in a thoughtful
Um,
way.
yeah. What did you notice in yourself? What was happening in you right then when you heard them say that they do trust the system?
That I'm in the right place.
Hmm.
I'm where I need to be. I felt an immense sense of belonging, meaning, passion,
Mm.
and it's what I would hope for my children
Mm.
as they find out what they want to do. Um, we always ask our children, what do you want to do when you grow up?
Mm-hmm.
And I have heard this through different channels, so I don't want to claim any credit for it, but I have switched it to what is your purpose and
Mm.
what's your passion that drives you? And select your career based on your purpose and your passion. And that moment in that community forum was that perfect intersection of purpose and passion for me that I wish to have for my children and anybody, any budding leader.
Mm-hmm. Um, that was very rich, and I'm trying to pull out a thread here. So, what did that moment start to shift in how you saw yourself as a leader?
How do you define leadership? I think when you take a step back and we look at how we define leadership, so often leadership is defined by a set of traits. And commonly we hear words like courage, listening, compassion, able to set an agenda, right? And the list goes on and on and on. Trust. Those are all salient virtues. We want to see those in leaders.
Yeah.
And I don't think it defines leadership. I think leadership is more of a verb than a set of traits. And this is what I learned from the Adaptive Leadership Network. And this is where I shifted as a leader in terms of how I look at leadership. And so when you ask me how that defined me as a leader, I think that's more of a dynamic process than a concrete definition, which is how do I mobilize people that I'm leading on behalf of a shared vision and all of
Mm-hmm.
the changes that come with that shared vision.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's ever evolving. And when I link it back to that moment, I realized ultimately it's not about me, it's about the work. And we always need to make things about the work and focus everything around the work. And in this case, it's transforming the healthcare system for the better. It's ensuring better health for all in the case of my organization, and working with other healthcare institutions in the area where we have a very similar shared vision.
What does it ask of you to to make that to focus on that? What does it ask to you to be a leader in transformation?
I think it's the recognition that it's not about you, it's about the work. And you always want to bring it back to the work. Anytime you're engaging in change and you're engaging in transformation of anything, there is going to be tension. If there's not tension, the work isn't getting done, right? And how you navigate that tension, it's easy to centralize and bring things back to you. Why are they not listening to me? Why are they not understanding me? So the shift is, well, it's not about me, it's about the work. And my role is to ensure the conversation is around the work, is around shared values, around a shared vision, and never losing sight of that.
What does it require of you to, how did you arrive at that? To remove yourself, it's not about me. How did you get there?
I don't think there was one particular point. I think there are so many aha moments where I look back and I think back to earlier in leadership and so many mistakes I made
Oh, can you
where
take, yeah.
yeah, where I made it out about me and I realized that it wasn't about me. It was about the work. Um, I can give you one of my favorite examples. I don't know if this is the best example, but bear with me. I was a young associate program director in an internal medicine residency program many moons ago. And the program director at the time said that we have a 3-year internal medicine residency program. And the shift from first to second year is daunting. To go from an intern to a senior resident who's now making clinical decisions.
Yeah.
That's frightening.
Mm-hmm.
And what he told me was a lot of the second year residents are really struggling with that transition, especially with respect to how they have to manage an intern now because they're in that senior resident role. How are we going to help them navigate that? And so what did I do? I got technical immediately. I got very, very technical. And what I did was I got right to work without even thinking about it, thinking it through. And I put together scripts for different types of interns that might be struggling and how a senior resident may respond. And we got all of the second year residents together in a retreat, and I handed out the scripts, and it wasn't exactly what I imagined. They all started giggling over the scripts. They were kind of making fun of it, didn't really take it seriously. They had the best time, but it wasn't what I had envisioned. And I took that so personally. I thought, oh my goodness, I put all of this work into this script and I was just trying to help them, and it was so focused on me. So it failed. I didn't meet the mission. The following year, that same program director had a different approach, and I decided to observe. What did he do? He walked into the room, he had the residents around him, and he asked them one question. What are your fears?
Mm-hmm.
The floodgates opened, and he just sat and listened the whole time. Didn't say a word, just listened. Occasionally, if he was asked a question, he would respond and process. And that's when I realized I lost sight of the mission. I lost sight of what I was there to do, which was holding space for the residents. And with my fail, I had centered on me instead of bringing it back to the work. And also recognizing about myself, I tend to get very technical instead of understanding what's adaptive and what requires more questions, more learning. And so I think that really highlights a mission realization moment for me, and how hopefully I've grown as a leader since then.
That's a very powerful story. What did you start to believe about leadership after that?
Listening tends to get lost in the shuffle. So much of what draws a lot of individuals to leadership is problem solving and jumping in and taking care of things. And there are certain things where the first step is not to jump in and take care of it. The first step is to sit back and listen and understand, listen to understand. And I think that's where my pivot was with my listening journey, was I was doing a lot of technical action, jumping in, putting together scripts for residents to talk about each of the different types of problem interns they may encounter without really listening to what is this really about. It's much bigger than that, which I would have understood had I stopped to listen, had I stopped to ask the one question that he had asked, which is, what are your fears?
What was the cost of that period for you before you made that pivot?
We tend to self-shame and blame with mistakes. And I've learned to understand that it's a necessary part of our journey. You can't progress in leadership without the fails. I have grown so much and made so much progress, not because of my successes, but more so because of times like that when I failed, which really deepened my understanding of why I needed to pivot and how I needed to pivot. And so the cost there are the change that comes with it, right? The losses that come with that change, and also the self-shaming and blaming and letting go of shame associated with failure. We learn.
Mhm.
We learn from the failure, we grow, and we need to let go of any blame or shame in how we handled it. Those emotions are raw and real
Mm.
and really have no place in that growth journey.
Mhm. Just sounding to me like maybe you were hard on yourself at that time when the amount of self-shame and blame. What do you think about that?
I suffer from imposter phenomenon. Are you familiar with imposter phenomenon?
Very much.
Yeah. And so for those who are listening who aren't familiar, this was groundbreaking work pioneered by Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes. And the imposter phenomenon, in a nutshell, is the very real sense that all of your accomplishments have come about not because of true innate talent. It's either from luck or simply working harder than anybody else. And imposters in particular, when they do have successes, it's thought to be because of luck or simply because they worked harder than anybody else.
Right.
And
It's
I, as an imposter, when I fail, have deep feelings of shame,
hmm
right?
hmm
Because, well, I didn't get lucky, and clearly I just didn't work harder than anybody else. That's where I tend to go. And I've
Yeah.
had to really, really shift my thinking.
How did you arrive at that shift, Vidya?
Mentors, you can't go about this journey alone, right? The leadership journey, my leadership journey has been made possible by the giants on whose shoulders I stand on.
Hmm.
And I have had so many wonderful mentors who have been willing to hold space for me
Mm.
and talk me through my failures and shifting me away from the shame and blame narrative to this didn't go well. Now you
Hmm.
understand why. How are you going to shift? What are you going to do differently? And importantly, how are you going to bring others along during their journey? How are you going to take what you learned and pass that along to other budding leaders? Because
Hmm.
I think in leadership, we also carry that responsibility, right? I
Hmm.
speak for healthcare, but I also speak for my children.
Mm.
They're an integral part of that journey. And I want to pass along what I've learned to them as well.
Hmm. Sounded like there was a shift from the failure piece to a learning piece.
It's lifelong learning. It's what drew me to medicine.
Oh, tell me about that.
Yeah. I think in medicine, and my field in particular, infectious diseases, it is ever evolving. You're never done learning. There's always something new. There's always something more to learn. And that's just on the book piece, the educational piece, evidence-based learning and whatnot. But there's also the humanity and patient care side of medicine, where I'm constantly learning from my patients, constantly learning from my learners. We make this assumption that it's the teacher who teaches the student. I think in healthcare, my experience has been it's bidirectional. I learn from my students and my residents and my
Mm.
fellows all the time. But that lifelong learning is what drew me to the medical field. And that's what draws me to leadership. You're never done. It's
Mm.
not finite. You're
Hmm.
always learning.
Where did you feel the tension between being a physician and being a leader most acutely?
It's interesting that you asked that because I consider myself an accidental leader in medicine. I thought I was going to be a physician and teacher. I was an associate program director. I was going to build the next generation of physicians, and that was it. And my entire physician leadership journey has not been one of my raising my hand and saying, I want to jump into this leadership position. It's always been a mentor tapping me on the shoulder and saying, Vidya, I need you to do this. And my pushing back and saying, I don't know anything about leadership. I don't think I can do it. More coaxing from them. No, you're the right person for this. My getting into it, loving it, because I'm working with people and problem solving. And then the next leadership position comes. And I think in medicine, in in the whole field of healthcare, we have an opportunity to build leadership development into our training programs, from pre-med in college to medical school, residency, fellowship programs, and for budding leaders who are faculty, junior faculty. It's nothing that's really been standardized. I'm seeing great models across programs in academic medicine, across the United States, but it really goes to show that we don't have any real standardized process by which we develop leaders in medicine. And I'm evidence of that, right?
Yeah. So I know that your mentors pulled you into something.
Yeah.
And at the same time, was there a moment when those two identities pulled you in different directions?
As physician and leader,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the best way to answer that. I think it's interesting how I shifted. There was a point in my career, mid-career in particular, early mid-career, where I was starting to burn out as a physician. I felt I was constantly on call, a lot of clinical work, and I was starting to burn out. And I thought to myself, as I get into administration and I reduce my patient care, that'll ease my burnout, which in some ways it did. But now that I'm heading more towards administration, I see patient care as my peace. It's my anti-burnout now. It's totally
Oh,
shifted
oh.
where it's the break from administration, where I'm healing in a very different way. I'm connecting in a very human way. Not that I'm not doing that in my administrative role, but it's different. Um, and so it's interesting how that totally flipped as I started shifting more towards administration and away from patient care, how much I missed patient care and how much I rely heavily on that to keep me grounded and to mitigate any burnout that I have from administration. Um, I also think that in healthcare, I love that I wear an administrative hat because when I see my patients and they complain about different parts of the healthcare system, I'm able to put my CMO hat on and say, I'm going to look into that for you.
Mm, mm-hmm,
Because chances are, if you're struggling with this, all of our patients are. So in
mm-hmm,
this role, I'm your physician, but I'm also going to use my administrative title to help alleviate some of these concerns that you have.
mm,
And so I
mm,
don't know if it's a tension as much as a balance that I feel
mm,
has been a great opportunity for me to
mm-hmm,
impact change at a large scale.
mm-hmm. I'm, tell me if this is useful or not, but what did that shift for you internally about how you see yourself?
I'm a mother first. When you ask me that and what my gut reaction is, what my most important role is, I'm a mom. I'm a mom to two boys,
Mm-hmm,
14 and 16, and I'm a healer. So I heal as a physician and I heal as what I hope is a transformational leader.
Mm,
And I have so many other identities that are important: wife, mother, sister, friend. But when you ask me my identity, it's mom and healer
mm,
that really float to the top as
mm,
what I see as most vital.
mm, mm. Lovely. Because you get to be a healer in both places, in both domains.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the healing goes both ways, right?
Mm. Tell me more about that.
Is I just talked about with burnout.
Mm-hmm.
My patients
Yes.
breathe air into me
Mm-hmm.
when I see them. I thrive on that humanity. What I learn from my kids as a parent is healing that also breathes life into me. So I see it as bidirectional healing in both spheres.
Mm. What a beautifully put. Well, you described your journey, and if someone is in a steep part of the learning curve right now,
Mhm.
what are they likely misunderstanding or missing?
That they're supposed to know it all, that their job as a leader is to know it all and solve the problems on their own. And
Mm,
the truth is that we don't know it all. We're never going to know it all. And that's not your job as a
mm,
leader to know it all. Your job as the leader is to listen for
mhm.
understanding, understand who the right stakeholders are to bring to the discussion for that learning, and holding space for any sort of transformation. It's so much bigger than knowing it all. And I think when you really believe that your job is to know it all, you become very narrow. And then you don't really accomplish much
Mm,
because you take it all onto yourself. And so much of this is also about relinquishing control.
yeah. Mhm.
Physicians in particular have trouble with relinquishing control. Relinquishing control is necessary in order to bring the right voices to the table, the right stakeholders to listen, to understand, and in many ways, let people lead change.
Yeah. When you realize that this is what physicians are taught in medical school, that
Mhm.
they're supposed to know it all and be able to solve problems,
Mhm.
what does that reveal to you about the system that you're working in?
That we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to not only build leadership training into the curriculum, the right leadership training. And I think this is where adaptive leadership principles come into play because I think leaders, in addition to all of the traits that I talked about, and learning about emotional intelligence and conflict mediation and strategic planning, right? Those are
Mhm.
all important parts of leadership. And so many times, what I see missing among some of the best leaders I've seen is not being able to distinguish technical from adaptive problems. I, what I was saying was that we need leadership development, we need leadership training in medical schools and beyond. And I really see an opportunity to inject adaptive leadership into that training because so many leaders were taught, if you have the privilege of attending leadership programs, we're taught about conflict mediation, emotional intelligence, strategic planning, SWOT analyses, the list goes on. And that needs to be married with understanding the distinction between technical problems versus adaptive problems and the very different approaches to both.
What does it require of you to stop and think about are we doing a technical versus an adaptive solution?
I think it goes back to really asking the question, does this require more learning? Does it require more listening? And I think that first question is what's often missed with people going straight to a solution, right? Taking a step back and understanding, what don't I know? What are some other voices that we need to hear? Who are some other stakeholders that we need to bring to the table?
Yeah.
And does this require more learning, more listening? And
Hmm.
to me, that's the first step.
Hmm. What questions do you take into the future? What are you still hoping to learn?
I want to always stay curious. And I'm seeing it in this wonderful generation of budding physician leaders, where if I could impart one thing to them, it would be to stay curious. And curiosity requires listening. It
Mm,
requires asking more questions and listening. And so I want to keep asking questions. I want to keep listening. And I want to keep connecting with people on a human level as I continue to transform and help them transform into the process. There's nothing I love more than seeing budding leaders have their aha moments
mm,
and continue to ask their own questions and be curious and make progress in leadership.
mm,
Um, and so that's what I hope for, is to continue to be curious, to ask questions, and learn in every sphere. Because
mm,
as we said, you're never done.
hmm. Well, I appreciate your passion for this work, the commitment that you're bringing, the healing energy, and your commitment to heal both for your children and for your patients, and to learn from them at the same time. Thank you for bringing that energy to this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Abby.